Hello, folks, and welcome to this very special interview. I'm very delighted to be joined by Ali Hillis today. Thank you for joining me, Ali.
Happy to be here.
It's not a first time meeting. We have met before. We met in London for KupoCon, which was back in 2019, which almost doesn't feel real anymore when you think I can't think of anything pre-pandemic now, right?
Right.
I think it was that would have been September. Have you been to the UK since then?
I haven't, no.
Okay.
I'm hoping to get back. It would be nice. Maybe we can meet up.
Yeah, who knows? It was certainly a busy
rendezvous over there.
It was a busy day. You were there with, I think, off the top of I think there was another 12 voice actors there. So it was nonstop and just constant for sure.
It was constant.
We certainly appreciated you coming over for it. It was a lot of fun. Did you enjoy yourself?
I had a great time. I mean, you throw such an amazing party.
Thank you.
It's like a nonstop Final Fantasy celebration. And I think while I was there, I didn't see one face that wasn't just brightened by the whole event. It was fantastic. We had a great time. And it feels like everybody did. It felt like a family, a little different than your normal con.
That's what we really drive for. I like for that intimate, inclusive experience.
Well, everybody goes there with something in common.
Yeah.
Right off the bat. So that's really nice. Super inclusive and supportive and fun.
I don't know if you remember, but it was at the evening event there. I think you were just heading off for dinner with, I think it was Ray and Quentin. And I gave you the Moogle headband. Did that ever make its way to your kid? Do you remember that?
It certainly did. And it's in her playroom as we speak. I believe it's a piece of art that she created that's kind of a funny little head. And so it looks perfect just there lit up.
I'm surprised it made it through the suitcase because those things are quite delicate. So
it did. Well, hey, I took good care, Alex.
Yeah, good.
That's very important.
Good. I forget if you flew. I think you flew with Virgin, and they're usually pretty good. Or British Airways, one or the other. So
I think. Good. Yeah, I can't remember which one, but it was great. I think yours was the only con I've ever done where I literally did a 24-hour turnaround. I in and out, and I'll tell you, I won't do that again.
Was it because I think you had a work commitment to get back to?
I had a work commitment, and I had to just go in and out super quick.
Because you were originally meant to be flying over with George.
Yes,
and then I think
George
I forget what happened with George. Something came up, and
he ended up working. I think he was still working on Scandal at the time. And then, he ended up having to cancel, sadly, but I made sure to let him know what a good time I had.
Good, thank you.
Without him.
Rub it in nice and good. But no, as I said, I really appreciate you coming to chat with me today. And I know that we did try and connect during the pandemic. I think it was like November time in 2020, and we didn't have an opportunity to connect. So
I know, it would have been nice. I'm so sorry.
Don't apologize.
I heard you had some great fun.
Well, we tried to keep the spirit alive.
People get through it at home. It was so hard, and so many people were so isolated. So I think interviews like yours probably meant the world to people.
Did you find the pandemic difficult? Like everyone I spoke to said it was a really surreal experience for them. Like, did you? I assume working from home a lot, that kind of stuff.
Definitely, it was a surreal experience. I felt lucky in that I had a home to live in, and I already had built this. We're in my little sound studio right now.
Oh, did you already have one prior to the pandemic?
I did. Okay, my dad actually drove from the East Coast of the States, North Carolina, all the way to California and helped me, pretty much built it by himself. I came out and held the hammer every once in a while. But he built me this beautiful studio that I'm in right now. And until the pandemic, I had pretty much been working with an iPad and a little Apogee mic, which, hey, that's a great mic, but it's my travel mic. And I just, I didn't use this much. I was always in a studio in Hollywood or, wherever. No. So I didn't spend a lot of time in here. And then the pandemic hit and I really had to trick it out with the best of gear and was kind of borrowing and stealing to finish this little studio up so that I could work from home. So yes, it was a jarring experience and it was crazy and just like everyone else, I was afraid and confused and frustrated and all of those things. But at the same time, I also felt very lucky because my job didn't have to stop. My on-camera world did. And there were times that even when, some TV film type of stuff did come up, I didn't feel comfortable yet. I have a child.
Mm-hmm. No, I mean, I have two young children. I can totally relate. Hilariously, though, it ended up being my children that gave me COVID when I finally caught COVID.
Oh, no!
My children.
Of course it was.
In school, which is, I guess that's to be expected.
I think that's how it is. So how did you got through it all okay?
Perfectly fine. Yeah, I think, I mean, by the time we got it, it was a much later variant, right? So it was certainly wasn't as hard hitting. The vaccines hit me like a brick. I was on the floor for 2 days, but
I'm
COVID,
sorry.
I didn't even realize I had COVID until I took a test, right? So,
wow.
But I'm thankful that I was able to push through it.
That's good.
But it sounds like your dad almost had an inkling that things were going to go to shit and had prepared
he gets those feelings, that guy. Yeah. So maybe he did. He gets those feelings.
Because I mean, so many actors I spoke to, were making makeshift booths and preparing and just doing everything they could to continue, right? Because 9 times out of 10, they would rather have you in the studio. They would rather have you doing your own thing. And I know a couple of people who had to go into the studio during, and they said it was a really weird experience because they would see nobody. Like the directors or producers would not even be in the room or behind glass. They would be just on a phone. That they had their own bathroom that had their name on it. It was all very, very, almost a bit prison-like. Not. It was a bit
prison-like. It was a very sterile environment, and everyone's being very careful with us, especially. Which is nice. It's nice and it's respectful, but it's also their bottom line, right? Because if somebody gets us sick, oops. I guess we won't be working for a few days.
Are you feeling like some sort of normality coming into play now? Like you're feeling a little bit more like
definitely. Yeah, I'm based in Los Angeles, and I feel lucky to be here because I feel like people have for the most part respected the masking, and it's just not really a big deal. It's like if we, if it comes to be that we all need to mask up again, then people just mask up and then when they release it, then it's released. And I don't really think there's as much of a stigma here for some reason.
No, I was in LA just in April. It was my first time in LA.
Oh,
and,
wow.
I'm not sure what the media is like in the US. I'm not there. But when you're, international, you do see a lot of negativity in the States towards mask wearing. And I experienced no issues. Like most people were masked up, very respectful of space. So LA definitely have their heads screwed on, which is good.
Right. Well, I also think, just like in the world of video games, I've always worked with a lot of Asian companies, and it was not unusual for someone to be sitting on the other side of the glass, meaning I'm in the studio, there's the glass between the engineers and I. Sometimes there's the writer, the producer, and then everybody's on that side. And it wasn't unusual to look over there and see someone in a mask.
Yeah. Because that was the way it was done. Yeah.
Because it's just respect. It's like, are you okay? Oh, yes, I just have a bit of a cold and I don't want to give it to anyone. Yeah. Oh, well, that's nice of you. Yeah. So I think, especially for me and a lot of more well-traveled individuals like yourself, it's it's just not unusual to see people wearing a mask. It's just a respect thing, so, and just like common courtesy, like I don't want to get you sick. So I'm just like covering your mouth when you cough.
Yeah, exactly.
But anyway, it's nice to get the COVID talk out of the way.
Absolutely. It's always hot topic. It used to be how's the weather, and now it's how's COVID, No,
it's how'd you fare through COVID? Yeah, exactly. But I miraculously never ended up with it, but I feel like not yet, but I feel like now hopefully all of our strains are going to get less, and we're going to hopefully everybody will start getting it and build their immunity, and then there won't be so much stigma and there won't be such a shutdown every time you do get it.
Well, congrats for avoiding it this long. That's impressive.
I've got a trophy on the other side of the store. No, I don't.
So let's now we've got the small chit chat out of the way. Let's talk about Final Fantasy because that's why we're here. And I know some of the questions that I'm going to bring up we've discussed on stage before, but for the many hundreds of thousands of others who may come across this video, I may just repeat myself a little bit.
It's nice to revisit it.
It is for sure, and it's kind of I don't know how it feels to you to think that recording Lightning would have been like the game came out 12 years ago, so I'm assuming the recordings were at least a year in advance of that. So it's like 13 or 14 years since you would have first sat down for that.
Is that really
a bit of a mind boggle?
Yes, I never even thought about that. Yeah, it's a long time ago.
Yeah.
Also, she's spun off, and I ended up recording as Lightning for so many other things.
Yeah.
I think I kind of forget that that's where she started.
Well,
Wow.
if you can cast your mind back, then we'll see what you can remember. We'll test you here. But so the game came out in 2010. Do you recall how the part came to you? Was it just via your agent, or did you come across it through a contact?
Oh, I remember it very clearly, actually.
Okay.
I was fairly new to the voiceover world. I'd been doing, I was, a born stage actor, basically. I went to New York first and then ended up in LA. And long story short, was doing television and film projects. And my dear friend Adam, hi Adam, said, he just called me one day and he said, oh, would you like to do voiceover? And I said, what's that? He said, well, it's pretty much everything. It's the voices in TV commercials or introducing television shows or in animation. And at the time, the acting in video games wasn't as prominent, I don't think, as it is today. There wasn't as much importance on the acting in video games. I feel like at the time it was sort of maybe becoming more and more important. And so, yes, I ended up with my friend Adam's agent because he said, somebody who sound like me just left. And would you like to meet with these people? And I said, well, sure, that'd be great. So I met with them, and luckily it was a match. And it wasn't long after that I had the audition for Lightning in Final Fantasy XIII. And I do remember that I maybe only had about 4 lines. There wasn't that much.
Right.
I should ask the producers. They're still good friends of mine. I should ask. There were about maybe 4 lines, and there might have been a drawing. And I remember reading the lines.
Do you remember any of the lines? Any at all?
I wish I did. You know what? I should ask because it would really be fun for these interviews. Maybe if we do another one, I'll actually have it.
We'll save it for this. Save it for
it'd be so nice. I know. I really should ask them if they can remember what it was. But I believe it was only about 4 lines. But I do remember in the room connecting to her. We read hundreds of auditions, but these were some of my first auditions. And for voiceover. And I remember connecting to something in the writing, which says a lot about the writing for an actor to connect in.
Especially if it was such a small amount of dialogue, yeah.
It was really small, yeah. But I connected to a depth in her, and I'm sure they gave us a paragraph about who she was and what she stood for and what her drive was in life. And so I read it, and yeah, not long after. Oh, by the way, I'm sure a lot of you already know this, but we don't get the titles or the character names. So they might have called this Watermelon. The character might have been Fluffy. I have no idea.
If I recall, it was presented as Project White.
Oh, I love it. Okay, yeah. Project White. Well, it should have been Project Pink. Anyway, so booking the role, I just was told by my new voiceover agent, hey, you got a job. I was like, oh, great. And it's a voice in a video game. I said, oh, cool. I hadn't done that many yet, maybe 1 or 2 things, but not much. So got in the studio, and Jack Fletcher, who was directing, I was at Frank Zappa's old studio here in Studio City. And I was sitting on a red couch, and in walks Jack Fletcher with his wild gray hair and his round glasses. And he was like, hey, so you're going to play Lightning. I'm like, oh, okay. Great. He's like, do you know anything about the Final Fantasy series? And I said, I don't know a lot. My brother used to play. I remember watching it, but I'm assuming it's changed a little bit since we now have voices, being cast, actors being cast. He was like, yeah. Okay. Well, here's a book. And he gave me a binder about yay thick.
Right.
He kind of threw it on the couch next to me, and he said, just learn all that, and I'll see you in the studio in about 5. And I looked at him, and he just walked away. And I opened the book. I was really confused. I didn't know what to do.
Right.
I wasn't sure if he was serious. Obviously, he was not. Mm-hmm. But anyway, so I got in the studio, and he was like, I was just kidding. He said, but he said, the weight of that world. He said, I wanted you to feel that book and see that. And this is the weight of this world that is going to be upon your shoulders, and I thought that was really cool. And we started recording, and it was interesting, which I think you probably remember this little tidbit, Alex, but after we'd recorded a few sessions, I invited the producer and director, Joe Mueller and Jack Fletcher, over to my house. They're cool guys, and my husband got along with them, and they came over and we had a little barbecue, a couple friends, and I think maybe Troy was here. I don't remember, Troy Baker, or I invited a few people from the game. And at this point, I still didn't know that I was the lead in the game. I had no idea. I knew my character was Lightning, and I knew it was a Final Fantasy game. That's it. They don't really sometimes fill you in. Mm-hmm. So I was talking about it to somebody who was here, and they were saying, oh, who are these people? I introduced them. I said, oh, yeah, these are some guys that I work with on this little game I'm doing. I play this character. Yeah, I play this character. And I think it was Joe that was like, because at the time I also didn't realize, like, I can't talk about any of this.
Yeah.
NDAs were still quite new, as I think they kind of came around with the explosion of social media and people accidentally mentioning things they shouldn't. And Joe was like, little game? It was like, this is the Final Fantasy series, and you are the lead in the next chapter, basically. And I didn't know. So that was kind of a funny story that they hadn't really clued me in that I was the main character in this particular game.
Do you remember if they gave you a code name for your character at the time?
You know what? I am going to ask Joe. Do you know it?
All I know is that they presented it as Project White.
As Project White.
That's all I know. And I feel like I may be completely miles off here, but I feel like for the second installment, they may have gave it something like Ivory or something. They have a pattern.
Maybe. Yeah. And You know what? That was at the time too, where they weren't really emailing me the copy.
Right.
The agent would call. It's totally different now. The agent would call or, and say, hey, got some auditions for you. When do you want to come in? And you say, oh, well, how about 1 p.m.? Okay, great. And usually you get there, they'd hand you your pages. Mm-hmm. So they were all cold reads. So Lightning was definitely a cold read.
Yeah.
We don't really get stuff much ahead of time, but nowadays they're emailed to us. So, it might be due in an hour or tomorrow or in 3 days, but you have a little time with it. But with this, no, it was literally... I know
with Final Fantasy in general, they don't give you anything. It's just in the studio on the moment of deal with it.
Yes. When we record, absolutely. Yeah. You don't get anything ahead of time at all.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it is. It's kind of nuts, but, they're really good with casting, and I think they kind of get an idea of who you are and what you're going to bring, knowing that, we're walking in blind for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
Except it was, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
It was really helpful to have it pre-recorded in Japanese, because I did get to hear some of that, and it would give me sort of a feel for her, which was nice. Sort of the music. It
gives you something to reference along to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So when you went in to do your original audition, I know you said you can't remember the lines, which is fine, but do you remember if there was much difference between your original recording and then when you actually got in to start recording lines? Did you just drop a voice on them and then they just stuck with it? Or was it a case of they're like, no, it's not quite right, this is something, we want something a little bit more like this?
That's a really good question. So I found out later that I was cast from a CD as the producer was driving in his car. He was driving to or from work and listening, as they have to hundreds and hundreds of samples of auditions of people reading. And mine stuck out to him. There was something about it he connected to, so he sent it to the director. And they both really liked my voice. And they submitted me. And what I heard when I got in the studio the first day, they said, listen, we love your sound. We love what you brought to the role. They let me know what it was about my audition that they really liked, that they wanted me to keep. I believe I read, and if I can ever get it, Alex, if I can ever get that recording, I will let you hear it.
I'd certainly be interested to hear it.
It would be cool, right? To have.
For sure.
That'd be an exclusive. But
I'll get my checkbook out.
No. Oh, this world has given me so much. The least I can do is give back. something cool like that. So they said, listen, we're having a little bit of an uphill battle because they're thinking, Square Enix is thinking they'd like to have a little bit higher sound, not quite as deep as you're going. Because, this is kind of voice I talk in, but as we know, lightning's more down here. Humans are tools. I'm not going to die for one of them.
Yeah, pretty dramatic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And edgy. And they said, they really would like to hear her a little bit higher. So let's give a few variations, but just know that we like that place that you were at. And they were playing it for me. But, everyone's making this decision. It's a lot of people deciding, what she's going to be, and how she's going to sound, also in comparison with the Japanese version. So we recorded her more like, humans are tools. I'm not going to die for one of them, and things like that. So we recorded some lines, and we ended up going back to closer to my original audition, which was a little bit lower. But there was, conversation between them, just deciding what was going to sound right for her in the Western version. Mm-hmm. So I know that was definitely something that they were discussing along the way.
Because I think we discussed this on stage, is that between the Japanese version and the English version, the relationships between characters are quite different, especially the relationship between Lightning and Hope, for example.
Right.
Very different in the Japanese version. Probably wouldn't, maybe in today's world, maybe, but probably not 10, 12 years ago, because I think they had more of a romantic kind of vibe in the Japanese one. Maybe it wasn't meant that way, I don't know, but it's certainly kind of, you do get that hint.
It kind of has a hint of
that
it.
That wouldn't have worked in a Western audience. People would have been freaked out by that.
They would have been maybe a little freaked out. And I remember specifically some of the Hope stuff, because I'm very much an actor that's about conditioning relationships, even in voiceover. Even if I'm relating to, a green four-eyed monster, I always create relationships with who I'm talking to and with the world around me. And definitely with Hope, some of those lines and some of those scenes really stuck out to me. And the softness, the sort of bringing him under my wing that I felt in Hours also was interpreted differently. I had a lot of people asking me at the tables at the conventions, like, how do you feel about your relationship with Hope?
Yeah. I see it as a mother, kind of a sisterly thing.
Yes, I felt like
supportive thing. But I think that depending on, I can see where they come from. But to me, it's, I choose to see it that way.
That's how I felt about it behind the mic. It was definitely was sort of like a little brother, big sister relationship to me. But hey, up for interpretation. Use your imagination.
So I won't talk too much about the audition stuff, because we've got, unlike most people who I just have one game to talk about, in your case, I have a lot more to talk about. The game comes along, explodes. At the time, it was their best selling in the series. I think it was like 1 million copies in Japan on day one.
I was floored.
Which is crazy. And then the English version came out several months later. With I think it was like 1 million copies in less than a month, which at the time was just off the charts, and at the time was the highest selling. And it was a huge deal to have a female as the main role, right? Like, I mean, these days you look at it and it doesn't seem like that much of a big deal. I mean, I'd say it's probably like a 60-40 split, probably still with 60% male getting main role, but it's very common to have a female just main role, and that's that. But at the time it wasn't.
No.
So, to be...
Unless the main role was either a vixen of some sort or a witch. Right. Or very, very seldom was it just a strong.
Not just in the case was it just a female role, but as a main, it was also a strong female role, right? Because let's face it, if we turn the clocks back even 10 years, or if you go a little bit further, most of the time women were just portrayed as objects, as sexual entities and this, that, and the other. And there's nothing wrong with a woman being sexy or whatever, but it was very uncommon to see a woman cast in a strong role. And Lightning is definitely a strong character. Certainly sets the tone. So did you feel any kind of pressure going into a role like that? Because you said at the barbecue that you found out like you were the main person, and the Final Fantasy series. Everyone, even if they've never played a game, knows how iconic the series is. And then to be thinking I'm a strong female character in the Final Fantasy series, that must be rather intimidating.
You know how sometimes you go into a situation that's all new to you, and you look back on it years later and you realize that the newness actually worked in your favor because you didn't realize that you should be nervous,
right,
or worried, or intimidated, or
so you just it was kind of like a duck to water type thing. You just felt
it
like
was work. It was work. And it also, every acting role, whether it be, animation or games or theater or films, or you're always bringing a piece of yourself to it. So I think there was a lot of her that was already there. And you probably hear some of that in some of the monologues and soliloquies that she has, where I was able to really pull from, real life to put into this character. So I think she came to me and I came to her at exactly the right time in my life.
Right.
So that I did not feel, outside of wanting to do a good job and give a good performance, the weight of it being a Final Fantasy series and being one of the few female leads in gaming. Luckily, I didn't know enough at the time to feel pressure or stress or nervousness about it. I just went into the studio every day and gave it my best, just like I always did, and sort of took on the challenge. Of course, finding out that, no, you're not going to have 3 more sessions. You're going to have like 103 more sessions.
Yeah.
As far as voiceover recording sessions for the game, that was a little enlightening, but enlightening.
Pun.
Anyway, but
it's certainly, it worked out massively for you. And I don't know if you know this, but some clever people ripped apart the game, and they looked into the files of the game, and they did find parts of what looked like downloadable content, DLC, that was probably originally planned for the first game. And it's widely believed that the DLC was scrapped and they decided to do the second game because the first game was so popular. Wow. So when you went in and you did the first game, and I would assume you must have recorded it. Usually it's like a year in advance, right? Like so, or did they run it quite? Okay.
Yes.
So let's say you were recording in 2009, let's say. A couple of years may have passed. I'm not sure. How long, do you recall how long it was after the game had released when they're like, hey, guess what? We need you again.
Right. After it was released, I was working so much at the time that kind of, it was just one thing after. I was checking boxes, Yeah. I was like, okay, I'm doing this. Okay, so I have to be back in the States for this.
Right.
Okay.
There was only 2 years between the games, so it couldn't have been too long.
It couldn't have been too long. No, I probably started hearing word of it, that they were going to spin it off. I can't remember if it was this. When was the second one released?
2012, February? I want to say, but I can't remember the month off the top of my head. So maybe
the last one was 2014?
I think it was. Yeah, I think it was just 2 years between each game, which is
2 years between each game.
That's crazy. In today's day and age, that's it's not possible.
That's unheard of. Yeah, they must have had one going before the other. You know,
for sure.
That's crazy. But I do remember hearing that it was happening, and I was absolutely thrilled. I had no idea how big or small a role Lightning might have in it, knowing that they would need to change it up.
And did you maybe when you went into the second one kind of sit down and think, oh, I don't have as much dialogue in this one, because you're certainly less focal, because obviously it was all about Sarah in the second game.
It was all Sarah's. It was Sarah's story.
Did that surprise you when you went in? Did you think, oh shit?
Not really, only because they're all different.
Right.
And, you just never know. Like sequels in films. I've done a few films that have spun off into another one, and they need to change it up. They need to, they can't give you the same game again.
Yeah.
So I wasn't surprised. I mean, you're never, hey, I'll always take more work, and I'll always love when my characters got more to do. But I thought the storyline made sense. And I was probably in the studio when they said, you're not going to have as many on this one, you know, because my agent's also trying to balance all the other jobs and figure out, you know, how we're going to navigate this, you know, schedule. So, yeah, but I was really excited that they were creating another one, and that it had such a great following in the first place, so that
it's
they
really
wanted to create
uncommon
another one.
For a game to, especially in the Final Fantasy series, to have a follow-up.
So
the only one that would have had it, I mean, you can't really count the online ones because they're just expansions, but there was Final Fantasy X had a second part, 10-2.
Yeah.
And Hedy, who voiced Yuna, she had that was basically the second game was all about her. So maybe that was, you know, I guess that was the first game that they had where it was a main, they were all the main characters were female. So maybe that was them testing the waters for what was to become 13
for
eventually.
What was to become, yeah.
But then, you know, which really, I just can't believe that, and not, you know, no disrespect, I just can't believe they gave you a third. It's just like mind-boggling, you know, it's just like, it doesn't happen. So surely when a
video game character shows up in Vogue magazine,
I know,
I guess you create a third.
So like when you did somebody show you the Louis Vuitton thing before?
Yes. I think I was somewhere else. I wasn't home when that happened. And I believe it was a best friend from high school that said, "Is this you?" And she just like paged through it. I said, "Oh my God." I mean, that was cool. That was really cool.
It's something that you just don't see, right? Like this cross between fashion and video game. But I guess the world now, when you look at it now, maybe not such a big deal. You know, you see watch brands and cars and all sorts of things in video games. But at the time I was like, it was like, what?
I think it was at the time where they were doing a series about iconic women or iconic female characters of the century or whatever it was. So it's pretty incredible that they chose Lightning as one of them. And I just wonder, it would be cool to get the story on that. You know, how did this come about? Is it because the designer, I always wondered if it was because, you know, the designer of the wardrobe that's worn, you know, in the games, the artwork is so incredible. And I believe they actually had a fashion designer doing, if I'm not incorrect, doing the, unless that was just hearsay, but creating the wardrobe in the game. So I wondered if there was some kind of crossover in that. Like that person is I would have to look up their name. I didn't know we were having a conversation about that. I should have gone back and refreshed my memory.
Oh, good.
But whoever the artist was or the designer, I always wondered if there was somebody
who knows, they could have just been a huge Final Fantasy fan somewhere and they were like, you know, this could
somewhere
be an
in there,
iconic
right?
We just don't
know,
it just
came up that, hey, guys, look at this. We have, you know, this is groundbreaking. This is new. This is different. This is definitely a female icon of our time.
Yeah. Do you remember how you got the information about Lightning Returns? Do you remember if that was an agent call or if the producer called you up when they guess what, you've hit the jackpot? Third time's the charm.
I believe so. I believe I got that phone call and said, you know, you're never going to believe it, but that was just, I was over the moon. That was very cool.
That's not a small one. Like in the second one, you had a comfortable amount of dialogue, but the third one, it's all about you again. You know?
It's back. We're back. Yep, exactly. And the third one had a different director as well. So I've had some people mention to me like, you know, in the third one, there was just a whole different feel or it felt different in some way. And there was a different director on that one.
I really
Chris
liked
Borders
the third.
directed. Yeah, Chris Borders, who was Gears of War and games like that, he directed the third one, and Jack Fletcher had directed, I think 13 and 13 too.
Right.
So that was cool. You know, we had a new experience, something different.
I mean, every game has a totally different play style to it. So the first one is fairly linear. You kind of follow the path. You can't derive from the path too much. The second one gives you almost too much freedom because you're jumping between times, and it's almost a little bit overwhilming, but it's a great game.
Almost too many choices.
Yeah. But the third one is almost like, it's like just right. It's kind of like the whole, what's it?
They hit the middle.
Yeah. It was, it's kind of like the whole, what's it? Goldilocks and the Three Bears. Is like, just, this bed's too soft, this bed's too high, this one's just right. But I really enjoyed Lightning Returns. I thought it was fantastic. I think it was the best one of the three.
Oh, that's great. That's good to hear. Coming from you.
Thank you. I'm just a random fan, but but like I think you portrayed the character fantastically, and I think that a lot of the reason why the game succeeded is because of how well you voiced the character, and I think that it was just generally a very good cast across the board. Do you know many of the cast personally, or
I do? Yeah, I mean, yes, we do keep in touch because it's such a. I mean, the voiceover actor world has become a lot bigger than it used to be.
Mm-hmm.
But we still have a lot of the same people that work on games and play, the characters that end up to be the more, the larger roles in the games.
Did you know Troy before, or you mentioned he was at the barbecue?
I didn't.
That time? You didn't?
No, I didn't. No, I just met him.
What about Rachel? Did you know Rachel before? Or do you keep in touch with Rachel at all?
No, I didn't know any of them before because I at the time was so new to the voiceover world. You've done a lot more
on-screen stuff, right? So.
I'd done more on-screen stuff, so I didn't know any of those guys. I didn't know anybody. And of course, we record alone. For this game, we recorded alone. For most games, we record alone. I've only recorded one game where I was with another person.
Which is incredibly uncommon.
It's really uncommon. It was for Kid Icarus, and it was really wild. We had a good time. It would have been really cool to get to record together for any of the Final Fantasy games.
Well, something we have done in the past is when we've had anniversaries of games, we've actually got all the voice actors on a Zoom call together and read lines, which is really
that's cool.
Enjoyable.
That's very cool because I love doing it in person too, and we get to come to your conventions live and see everybody. It's I feel like, I mean, you can take a poll, but I feel like I know that as a fan of certain things myself, always seeing the performances live, it's really neat, and the lines aren't going to sound the same. I'm not an actor who goes back and listens to exactly how I said something. Mm-hmm. I just let it come out naturally as is. So we are really replaying, right in front of people.
I got to meet Rachel for the first time. She came to an event that we had in Scotland. I think it would have been... Oh,
nice. Oh, nice.
I think it was just after. It was in February of 2020. So it was just before the pandemic hit.
Oh, wow.
And she came up to Scotland, and I think that she said that she was used to people coming up to her table and, at conventions, but nothing could have prepared her for the lines that she had when she came up, because to have so many Final Fantasy fans in one place, she was just overwhelmed with how many people. It's really
magical.
Yeah.
It's incredible. And that's how, and I hope that you get to see George Newbern Sephiroth sometime. But that's how he started doing conventions. He also plays the role of Superman. He plays a couple other voiceover roles as well as his on-camera career. But he had gone to a convention here in the States, in California. And I had been telling him, because he kept on following his Superman role. And I kept telling him, like, you really need to understand how huge the Final Fantasy fanship is and how important it is to be out there in the world.
Yeah, I don't think you can quite grasp it until you experience it. That's what I always tell people.
Exactly. And so he did one convention where it did have quite a Final Fantasy attendance, fan attendance. And he came back and he said, "Oh my God, you are right."
Yeah.
He said that was incredible. And that's how I sort of convinced him to come join us in London, but not available. Maybe another time. But
another time. Yeah. Well, look, I've kept you long enough. It's been lovely talking to you, as it always is. I do hope that when the world allows, and we're starting to roll back into some big events.
We're starting to roll back.
Lovely to have you back sometime, and to live it up. And it's always, as I said, it's been a pleasure talking to you. I could have talked to you all night, and I just realized we've gone way over time.
I know you. I'm sorry, and I know you have another interview coming up. So
that's okay.
But thank you so much. Thank you for having me, and thanks to all of you out there. I hope everybody's doing well, and I can't wait to see some of you live someday soon.
Thank you very much, Allie.
Thank you, Alex. We'll see you later.